Is the most important thing, is the very most important thing that you could do to help yourselves in your careers, because there is nothing that unlocks the ability to connect, to influence, to inspire your teams, your colleagues, your bosses, your executives, your customers, your clients than communication. So I'm excited to dive in. And let me go ahead and just pull up some slides here. We're going to make this as interactive as possible. So I invite everyone to come on camera. Thank you, Debbie, for your note about the audio. Totally fine. We all experience those technical difficulties. But if you're able to, please join us on camera so that we can see you, we can interact. We're going to have just one short breakout session that's part of this today, but we're going to make this, like I said, as interactive as possible. So you might just grab a pen and a piece of paper to jot down a few notes. You will receive slides for all of the key things that we're going to be talking about today. So don't worry about that, but we will have a couple of little exercises where you'll be jotting some notes down. Sound good? Okay, let's go ahead and jump in. So this is all about, as I mentioned, communicating to inform, inspire, influence. And the big question that I have for everybody here is, what experience do you create? What experience do you create? I want you to think about that. Every time you communicate, every time you open up your mouth, every time you start an email, every time you start a call, you are creating some kind of experience. And it's either one that engenders trust and credibility and connection and rapport, or it's one that maybe takes away from those things. So to illustrate this, I've got a couple of videos that I want to show you, and about two completely different experiences. And so this is a tale of two launches, two product launches, and they create very, very, very different experiences. So almost identical product, very different experiences. And so it's the communication experience that we're tuning into here. So take a look at this first one. It happens to be the most famous product launch of all time. Can anyone guess? You can come on off of mute and just shout it out. Anyone guess?
iPhone.
iPhone. Thank you. Jochen, did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
Hopefully. Okay, great. All right. All right. So take a look at this. This is Steve Jobs launching the iPhone back in 2007. Take a look at this. Let me get this video all queued up for you here.
Three things: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communications device. An iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. An iPod, a phone. Are you getting it? These are not three separate devices. This is one device. And we are calling it iPhone. Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone.
Okay, that's pretty phenomenal, correct? I mean, so Steve Jobs was known for this. He was known for being so meticulous and so careful in the type of communication experience that he would create that people literally were crying in the audience because they were so excited about everything that he was delivering. So that's one version of this. So Tale of Two Cities, let's juxtapose this, put this right next to another product launch and see, this is a really different communication experience. This is Google launching their version of the iPhone, which was the Nexus One back in 2010. And take a look at how this one came out. I will just pull this up for you right now.
And today, we're announcing the Nexus One. Nexus, the dictionary definition of nexus is that it's a point of convergence, a means of connection.
Okay, very different experience, correct? Very, very different. So it's same product, different communication experience. So this is how communication underlies really everything that we're doing. So how do we break this down, and how do we start thinking about creating a communication experience that influences, connects, inspires. So take a look at this notion here, which is we're going to talk about mapping your experience and being really intentional about what that looks like. So if you thought about a GPS that you're using to get from point A to point B, we have to put a destination into that GPS in order for it to work. Well, we don't often do that with our communications. With our own communications, sometimes it's like, this is everything that I need to get across. I need to move forward with this. I'm trying to just knock this off my agenda so that we can be all done. However, we need to be more intentional about that. So we created this notion of a communicator's roadmap. So this is a roadmap that will help you. And again, we'll have slides for everyone afterward so that you can take this back and reflect on these. So let me explain this. On this horizontal axis here, we have that of content. And content are the words that you're saying. So that's the argument that you've put together, that's the pitch that you've put together, that's the deck that you've put together by way of connecting the outline of the content. And it ranges from self-centered content, which is more about my subject matter expertise. It's not about me necessarily, but it's about my subject matter expertise in the area, what I need to get across. It's very focused on my point of view versus being very audience-centered. So how do I make that very relevant to the audience? Then on the on the vertical axis, we have that of emotional connection. And emotional connection ranges from either low to high. So when you think about a low emotional connection, think about trust, rapport, connection, credibility, all of those things. And where these two intersect create a few different kinds of experiences. So in this lower left, we have that of inform. Inform, you could think about a really, really boring university or college professor where it is their subject matter expertise that they are trying to get across, but they do it in a very, very low emotional way. So they're not very connecting. They're just trying to get the information across. And of course, we have meetings like that, and that's fine. That's, a project status update, something like that, inform. In the upper left, we have that of entertain. So this could be a sports commentator, this could be a talk show host, but in the professional setting, it might be an MC at an event or something like that. So it's still their self-centered content, but very high emotional connection. Now, here's where we find a lot of leaders that we work with. So we do a lot of one-on-one executive coaching with our clients across a variety of our clients across industries. And we find them most of them in this direct quadrant, where they're pretty good at articulating a message in a way that resonates with the audience, but maybe doesn't have as much emotional connection as it can. Now, here's where we can all aspire to be, and that's in the quadrant of inspire, Now, that feels like a lot. Sometimes people go, inspire every meeting? No way, that's crazy. But when you can inspire your audience, if inspire feels like too lofty of a goal, I want you to think about influence. Communicating to influence, not just communicating to inform, but to influence. And yes, even inspire, because when we can inspire others, all of a sudden the audience reaction changes from one of, okay, I'll do it because I have to. That's more in the direct quadrant, to I'll do it because I want to. And as leaders across Otis, you've got the challenge of not always having direct authority over the individuals to whom you need to influence. So it becomes a critical skill being able to communicate to influence, particularly when you don't have direct authority. And as we work in matrixed organizations and cross-functionally across the board, we often don't have that. So it's very, very important to be able to start flexing this skill. So let me make one point here on this map. You can be anywhere on this map. Anywhere is fine, as long as you intended to be there. So it doesn't mean that you always have to be in Inspire all the time, as long as you intend to be there. So I've got a project status meeting. This is straight up an informed situation. That's where I'm going to focus. Or I need to be very directive. We're managing a crisis. We're managing a challenge. I've got to be very direct. That's fine as well, as long as you intended to be there. But if you said, we've got this big new initiative. We really need to gain a lot of buy-in. We need to rally the team around this. I have to inspire people, but I ended up informing them just because I didn't think about the kind of experience I was creating. That's what would stink. So we want to be mindful and intentional about those experiences. So we're going to talk today about how do we pull the levers around emotional connection, and then how do we pull the levers around content as well. Sound good? Okay, good. I love nodding, smiling, thumbs up. All those are really good things. Okay, that's fantastic. All right, so we're going to enter just a quick breakout here, and chat. And what I'd like you to do is to think about all of these different opportunities that you have throughout the course of your day, because this isn't like, oh, I'm Steve Jobs and I'm getting up on a big stage, and that's when communication really matters. No, communication matters in all of these different situations over the course of the day, the week, the month, the quarter, the year. So we don't want you to ever to miss an opportunity and be very intentional about planting those destinations. It matters for all of them. So this little breakout is just very quickly, Samantha's going to put us into breakouts in just a moment, and we're just going to spend a little bit of time there. But I'd love you to share a bright spot and a challenge. So a bright spot for your own communication. Think about, you know what, I think I'm really strong at delivering difficult news. Or I think that I have a tough time working with this particular audience, or just a general communication bright spot, something that's going really well for you, and then a challenge. What's something that you know that you need to work on as it comes to communications in general? It doesn't have to be limited to the roadmap at all, but just think about those communications bright spots and challenges. Everybody clear? Okay, sounds great. Samantha, we're ready.
All right, here we go. And did you want 10 minutes, Kelly, or 8?
You know what? Let's go ahead and do 8 is fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
hmm
All right, we'll see you back here and then we'll debrief with everybody. All right, welcome back, everyone. I think we've got everybody. Look, so many more faces too. How fantastic. All right. Let's see. Let's do just a quick debrief. We've got a small group here. So who wants to share some of the both bright spots and challenges that your group was chatting about?
Well,
I'll do it.
I can take one. Well, go ahead, Greg. Go ahead.
So Edward was in our breakout, so this will be easy and concise. So I think in totality, we talked about our past in running P&Ls and having a concise team that was driving towards very common goals, and we all felt that that was a much easier environment to motivate and inspire, even when it's potentially challenging conversations. That
Yeah.
it kind of bred that motivation conversation. Where we struggled, or for a couple of us, is when we were updating, progress reports, and that felt flat to us.
Yeah.
And you're providing information, and potentially those people are taking that information and cascading it to their organization, and you want to make sure it's coming across as high motivation and high inspiration, so they can take that and they can cascade it down to their organization. But when you're running a P&L, there's goals and opportunities that are much more defined, and it just lent itself to being in that inspire quadrant.
Yeah, right. Thanks, Greg. Really appreciate that. It's funny with those when you've got those more standard updating reports or providing information, the challenge becomes, what do I want people to do with this? So I really do need to step back and think about what kind of
Yeah.
experience do I want to create? And to your point about thinking about the end user of all of that information as well. So it's not just my team, but now if that message gets cascaded, then how do I arm them with the right message to take forward so that it doesn't become a game of telephone where the message gets twisted and convoluted? And so how do we then help our teams? Every time you cascade a message, it requires translation, and we'll talk about what that means just a little bit later. Thanks for sharing. Edward,
Of course.
anything to add to that from your group?
No, nothing
Okay.
was quite complete.
Okay. All right, great. Juicy, I saw you lean in and come off of mute there. I'll let you go ahead next.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, we talked about, I have the opportunity in Italy to manage a very complex environment, and I shared my experience on communication aspects, saying that I learned the importance to be transparent in communication, and so for sure it is a very direct, way to communicate, but it's really very important also in this time when we have to face with a big change in the company, and so transparency for us is really a very important point. And another point is to communicate in a positive way, and so try to to be positive also in the communication. And these are the two main points that we discussed about.
Thank you for sharing that. And not always those are two very difficult things to manage with this at the same time as well. Trying to be very transparent and positive in the same time sometimes don't work really well. So how to change that message. And we'll talk about really focusing on the listener, the audience, to make sure that we're doing that. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else from another group?
I think one of the common thread we got in our group is the authority. When the audience is having a higher authority,
Mm-hmm.
so sometimes it becomes challenging to communicate to higher authority. Mainly sometimes audience expect good news and we don't have good news to deliver, right? So that become one of the challenging tasks.
Yes, that's a good one, Hirsch. Okay, so communicating up to more senior executives possibly who are expecting really positive results, and we might have to have a transparent and yet positive conversation about it at the same time. Okay, fantastic. So we are not generally, I love to have these conversations because we are not short on challenges, and it really helps to start talking about, gosh, how is that difficult for you to communicate that? What's difficult for me? Because what we'll find here is that your communications will always improve when you ask for a little bit of feedback, when you ask for some help from another person and you say, hey, I'm about to present this message. How does that come across? How does that sound? What's your reaction? What am I forgetting? So all of those things are really, really helpful in that process. Okay, thanks everybody. We will jump right back in now. And what I'd like to start with, I'm just going to frame for you as we think about communications, is like, what are the parts of communications that really that come to life in this? And so we have here the three V's of communication, the letter V, the three V's of communication. We have verbal, vocal, and visual. Verbal is the content of the message itself. So those are the words that you're saying. Vocal is the sound of your voice, the pitch, the tone, what people hear. And then visual is what you see of another person as they're communicating with you. So not your slides, but you specifically as you're communicating. So if you were to rank what you think counts in communicating, is it even across the board, 33.3% in each category? Is one more heavily weighted than the other? What do you think? Just throw out some ideas there. You can put them in chat as well. You can just shout it out. What do you think?
And the vocal is 50%.
Verbal?
Vocal.
Vocals, 50. Okay. What else do you have, Hirsch?
Visual 25 and verbal 25.
25, 25. Okay. So vocal most heavily weighted there. Somebody else have a different idea? Debbie, I saw you come off a mute.
I would say the visual, like I'm assuming nonverbal. I would say that's
Okay.
probably 80 to 90%. For me, I think it's 80 to 90% of what
Okay.
we
All right. How
communicate.
about this? Let's just show of hands here. You can raise your hand. How many people think verbal as most or equal importance? Most or equal? Okay. How about vocal, most or equal importance? Yeah, a couple more there. All right. And visual, most or equal importance. Okay, most there. All right, majority. So we're going to turn to the research and see what the research says. But before we do that, I'd like you all to do a very quick exercise. So make a peace sign with your right hand. Everybody make a peace sign. Okay, everybody do this. All right, hold it out in front of you. Hold it above your head. Hold it out to the side. And put it on your chin. Put it on your chin. Okay, let me see. Like, oh yeah, oh, there's my chin right there. Okay, all right. So that is a ridiculous exercise. Of course it is. But here's why we do this. What's most important to the tune of these numbers here? We turn to this classic piece of communications research by Albert Mehrabian out of UCLA. He wrote a book called Silent Messages, and that's exactly what these numbers reflect. So this is one of the most well-known pieces of communication research. It's also one of the most misinterpreted because people look at this and they say, well, if I just really look really great and I come across very great, then it doesn't matter. 7% only accounts for the content of my message. That's not it at all. What his research showed is that when you have an inconsistent message, that is, when the words that you're saying don't match how you come across as you say it, people believe those visual cues and the vocal cues over the actual words themselves. That's why I said chin, but you saw cheek. But although most of you, we were a couple of you were very good. You went right to your chin. It was very good. But right here, so the message is inconsistent. The words don't match what you see visually. So those visual cues become so important that we actually literally forget that we even said it. So what happens is the vocal and the visual completely block the verbal. It's as if I didn't even say it. Because we had a couple, although I did see a couple like, oh yeah, it's on my chin. I got it. I got it. Okay, but here's the convicting part here. Let me go back to these numbers. Where do you spend your time preparing for a meeting? What, like Elvira? She's like, oh yeah,
Verbal.
yeah, okay. What's that?
Verbal.
Verbal.
Verbal, like
Verbal.
99.999% on the content of the message and nothing about how that is delivered. So you can end up having something where that verbal and vocal is completely blocking all of that verbal, all the content that you spent all that time preparing. So that's why we focus on this notion of boosting emotional connection first, because how we come across the visual and vocal aspect of it matters a lot. So let me show you this here. We judge very, very quickly. We pop into a meeting, we've got a new team, they're judging us, we're judging them. Do I like this person? Do I trust this person? Do I connect with this person? Do I believe that they're credible? Can they do this job? Are they expert? And so I want to show you a video here. There's no sound on this video, but just take in these two individuals here. Who would you like to listen to for more than 40 seconds? Maybe. What do you
The
think?
lady.
Edward, we'd like to listen to her. Now, that's because she's got a little bit more energy. She's connecting. Now, here's what's going on. They're actually talking about the exact same thing. So this is similar to the Steve Jobs versus the Google announcement. So we're creating two different experiences based on this. And all of these things, these are all the visual things that we see of someone as they're communicating with us. So it's not as if he said, oh, I can't wait to bore everyone today and put them all to sleep as I present this in this meeting. That's not what he was doing, but he's got a set of habits here that are ineffective. And that's what's beautiful about communication is that they're just a set of habits that you can shift and change and correct. And then, of course, we're on Zoom and now we're in a little box. And so some of those habits become even more pronounced as a result of it. So we focus here on when we think about those behavioral aspects, again, focusing here on the on the visual, what people see of you, and the vocal, what they hear of the sound and tone of your voice. So that's where we're focused here. Amy Cuddy is a professor at Harvard, social psychologist who's done incredible research around this notion of warmth and competence. Warmth and competence. And she said in her research, she said, when we go to meet someone for the very first time, we are trying to, if I go to, meet everybody here, I want to project as much competence as possible. Like I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and people like me. So I'm trying to project all of that. But the other person on the other side is trying to pick up on warmth. Do I want to continue this conversation at all? Do I feel connected to this individual? So she said it's very much about a balance of the two. And there are times and circumstances, and especially in a global company, there are shifts and changes here that we have to maintain culturally. But here's what she said we often miss. When we lead with too much competence and we forget warmth, she said warmth is the conduit of influence. When you can prioritize warmth, it helps you connect immediately with those around you, demonstrating that you hear them, understand them, and can be trusted by them. So when we start thinking about, those messages where we have to be transparent and yet we have to be positive when we're delivering difficult news, there are these aspects of warmth to bring into play along with competence, equally important. But how do we show that as well to help that? So, we combine these two things, the perception of a leader. So if you blend the warmth and competence together, people feel connected in general. People feel connected and trusted to you. If you're warm and incompetent, that doesn't work really well because people go, "Oh, thank you, you're very nice, but you're very unhelpful as well." So that's not great for my day-to-day job. Then you think about cold incompetent. Now think about this. Think about someone that you've worked with, worked for. Most of the time people can recall a boss, or maybe you've had an interaction with a doctor in some sort of health that you've had or some member of your family, and you're working with a very, very competent doctor, but gosh, they are very, very cold and it's very difficult to understand kind of the fullness of the situation. So it's like, I'll grind it out. I will just keep going. I know I can learn something from this, but it's not a great experience. And then finally, if you're cold and incompetent, that's a deal breaker. And I don't believe anybody would be in this program if you were cold and incompetent. So we don't have that to worry about. We call this at Decker, we call these things, we break down warmth and competence as the behaviors of trust. So what are the behavioral skills, the things that you can do and how you show up visually and vocally to ensure that you're connecting with others? These are no-brainers. These are things that you've likely heard of in some communication course at some point in your education or in your career. We know that these things are important. Now, where they come into play, that connection piece, this warmth and connection piece up top, eye communication, critically important. Posture and movement, expression, gestures, facial expression. Those are the things that people feel more connected to you. And then finally, to add credibility to your message is that voice and vocal variety. How does your voice sound? How does that come across? Does it come across as confident? Or does it maybe come across like maybe you're questioning something? So you might be going through a list of items to be covering, and you end with a slight question mark at the end. So there's a lilt. And so as you're going through the information, you want to make sure that people are understanding. And it starts taking away your credibility. So all of this, it's not as if your audience and your listeners are saying, what does their eye communication look like? What does that voice sound like? No one's doing that. We're always judging this at the subconscious level. And so, but we often don't know how we come across. So how many people have seen themselves on video recently? Show of hands. Anybody watch themselves? Debbie, I see you. Rena, Joggin. Okay, just a handful. Greg, I see you. Okay, so just a couple of there. That's it. Get yourself on video and watch it. It's the most painful experience ever, but it is one that is well worth it because you can start analyzing these things more from an objective point of view and say, okay, I know what I can tweak and shift and change. I have a video here of a woman named Tashonda Duckett. She is the CEO of TIAA. It's a large financial services firm based in the US. She's a fantastic communicator. So I want you to just take in this notion of warmth and confidence and how she comes across in this. She's giving a panel discussion here. And this is when she was actually president of Chase Consumer Bank, a previous role that she had. So just take in the experience that she creates and pay particular attention to the warmth and confidence. And we can open it up for any comments from there. Take a look at how she kind of combines all of these things together. Let me get to that one. Here we go. Everybody see that? Great.
Within the first 90 days or so being CEO, I went to the mailroom. And I went to the mailroom because I wanted to make sure that the people farthest away from the earnings, farthest away from when we're talking about helping our customers, I wanted them to know that they mattered. And so when I went to the mailroom and I told the guys in the mailroom, thank you. I said, I want to thank you for doing your job with excellence. Because when people make their payment, you start the process. And if you don't put it in the right chute and it accidentally goes to the mortgage chute or something else, it doesn't post on time, they're upset, they end up closing their relationship. But because you show up with excellence, when you hear Jamie talking about our earnings, or when you hear me talking about the progress we're making with our customers, brush your shoulders off and know that you have a role. And you know what these men said? They happen to be all men. They said, "You welcome, we got you." And so my point is that when you think about the opportunity and you recognize that talent is created equally, opportunity is not.
Okay, what'd you think? Comments on that? What'd you observe?
She's good.
Edward, okay, she's good. How is she good? Why is she good?
She's reliable.
Okay. What did you see that makes you think that?
Engaging.
Engaging, yeah. What were the specific, so what we're trying to do is break down those specific behaviors because we often will look at someone and go, oh my gosh, they are an amazing communicator. Now, why? What makes them like that? And it's a set of specific behaviors. So what is she doing that makes you feel that way? What do you think?
For
So
me, the voice
authentic.
intonation is important. She's absolutely not monotonous. She's just the voice is keeping me on. I'm listening because the voice is very good.
Right, right. So the voice is engaging, and she's got so it's that vocal aspect, the visual aspect as well that keeps you engaged. So she's more animated a little bit more, and I understand cultural differences here. However, that's the part that keeps people engaged. It doesn't have to be as big as she was, maybe, but it could be a little bit lower like this, and you're going to modify that based on cultures, of course. Jochen, did you have a note?
Yeah, a couple of things, right? So the force of her gestures with her hand felt
Yeah.
that indicated that she truly believed in it, and the way she smiled when she was speaking shows a level of genuineness in how much she appreciated what came out of that incident or that event.
That's
So there's
great.
a bit of genuineness and intentionality which comes out from the way she was moving her arms and the way she was smiling.
Yeah, yeah, great notes there. Greg, did you have something to add there?
Yeah, she just came across as very authentic, and it was her story. So, like, she led forward by talking how it impacted her as well as the organization.
Yeah. Now think about, always want to, so the communication experience she's creating is one that is connected, trusted, credible, all of the things you mentioned. It's because she was delivering it with a set of specific behaviors. So it was a really nice, it's one of the best examples I can find of this warmth and competence coming together. And so, there are times when you're going to want to lean more into warmth or you're going to lean more into competence, and you've got to adjust for those. But those two things coming together really show that value of connection. So now all of a sudden, now she's in a position to be able to inspire more effectively. And when we talk about inspire again, it's not just getting people to feel really good about, you're ultimately trying to change the way the people think or act about something. That is your number one goal as leaders throughout the rest of your career. How do I get people to change the way they think or act about this so that we can move forward with this OKR, so that we can deliver on this goal, so that we can shift our strategy, so that we can allocate different resources? Like, that's ultimately what we're trying to do, is how do we get people to change the way they think or act so that we can move something forward and move the business forward. So that's the value in that. And so we always start with that behavior because, again, we focus all on the content piece of it. That's where we feel really comfortable. We spend a lot of time. We want to make sure that's all good. But if it's not delivered in a way that makes an impact, that makes people feel a little bit differently about it, they're not going to be as likely to take action on it. So that's why we focus on those behavioral skills first. Any questions? We're not going to go into specifics on any of those details today, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Does anyone have any questions about the skills that we just ran through briefly here? And what I'd like you to do is be thinking about what are just two things you might do. Two things. Don't pick all of them at one time because that makes it very, very difficult to change those habits. But communication is a set of habits that we can shift or change. So, what are two things? And go ahead and jot those down. I'd love you to be aware of those over the next week or two So maybe you've gotten some feedback, it's speak more clearly, it's speak slower and not speak too fast, too quickly. It could be that you have a lot of filler words, ums, uhs, like, and. It could be eye communication in some cases. Maybe just being very focused on notes and things and kind of forgetting about the importance of tuning back into your audience through the camera when we're presenting remotely. So just a couple of things. Go ahead and jot those down. Pick two things you know you need to work on and commit to those over the next week. Does anybody want to share two that they're going to focus on this week?
Language and pausing.
Language and pausing. Okay. What's that mean for you, Jagan?
So I work in Asia Pac, which means that we have a lot of different, people from a lot of different cultures um, and countries and language backgrounds. So when you significantly only use English as a modus of communication, you tend to forget that if you speak too fast, it makes the other person uncomfortable. So learning to pause and not using complicated words is something that I'd like to work on.
That's great. That's great. Thanks for sharing that. Anybody else have one they want to share?
I would choose voice and vocal variety.
Okay. What's that mean for you, Hirsch?
I think bringing that variation while speaking can make a better impact,
Okay.
and that's what I felt. And one of the improvement area which I started working on few months back was on the voice and how to modulate the voice.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it's a really tough thing. I think the voice is one of the most difficult things to continue to do, and because it's very hard for you to hear your own voice. So one of the best things that you can do for any of you that are working on voice and want to make sure that you don't come across very monotone, for example, and you want that variety to come in, just really try to overdo it. Just get really far outside your comfort zone, and you could do this just as a test for yourself. Record yourself on your phone, record yourself on a Zoom, and then just listen to it. You don't even have to watch yourself, but just listen to it and say, okay, what worked, what didn't work? And what you'll be surprised with is, gosh, I feel like I really sort of overdid it in my exercise, and it will come across not quite like that at all. So give that a go. All right, video and audio recording is the best thing that you can do to practice all those things. Okay, let's move on. And here I'd like you to think about, before we jump into this next section, we're going to start talking about content and creating content in a way that shifts the way that people think or act. But we're going to introduce a part of what we call our Decker grid system, which is a method for organizing content. And I'd love you to pick something coming up in the next week or two so that you can actively work on it, and it would be a very helpful thing. But this is something where you're trying to influence others. So in other words, this is not just a project status update, like a click, 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 check the boxes. It could be something about Otis and its offerings if you're customer facing or client facing. It could be a new initiative in the organization. It could be a shift in strategy, a change in resources, reorg. I mean, I know there are lots and lots of different opportunities and topics that you might speak about, but just go ahead and think about one. You don't have to decide it right now, but we are going to jump in with an exercise around that. So just kind of have that in the back of your head. Good? Okay. All right. So let's go ahead. And as we start moving into this about content, how do we think about content? I love this quote from Chris Anderson. He's the curator for TED. So he's the one that builds all the TED conferences. And he said, what would happen if you wanted to persuade people to come along with you on a journey? You have to start where they are and give them a reason to come with you. Now, what's the problem with that? We start where we are. We say like, hey, you over there, come with me, come this way, let's go. But what he's suggesting is you actually have to go walk over to that individual give them a good reason, and then bring them with you. And so it goes back to how we think about the roadmap. Oh, excuse me here. We already talked about that. It goes back to how we think about the roadmap and moving from self-centered content to audience-centered content. The really difficult part about that is something called the curse of knowledge that gets in our way. And it happens to all of us. And it gets worse as we gain experience and expertise over time. And what the psychologists and behavioral economists have been studying the curse of knowledge for years and years and years. And what it states is that basically it's very hard for you not to know what you know. Think about that for a second. It's really hard for you not to know what you know. So when you communicate, our tendency when we communicate is to operate from our base of knowledge, and we start speaking about things in a way that we just say, gosh, everyone will understand that as well. But of course they don't, but we often forget that. So a very, very simple example of that for me, I can get by technically, but I'm not a very technical person. So when something goes wrong, and I'm also not very patient. So when something goes wrong with my computer, I call IT and I say, I'm looking for one button that I can push and make the problem stop. That's all I want to hear. And IT starts talking to me and processing speeds and memory and did you do this? And so I'm a victim of the curse of knowledge in that case. So they're so cursed by their own, it makes sense to them, but it doesn't make sense to me. So we have to be very mindful about the curse of knowledge. I want to give you an example of what this looks and sounds like. So this is a story of a company called Razorfish. Razorfish was one of the huge successes to emerge from the dot-com boom in the late 90s in San Francisco and in the United States. And they had an opportunity to be featured on a news show, on an American news show, where they could tell everyone about their company. I mean, it's like basically free publicity. This is a wonderful opportunity. They struck out not once, not twice, but 3 times trying to articulate what it is that their company did. Take a look at this video here.
It's here that Jeff and Craig launched Razorfish, which is now worth $4 billion. One of the most successful companies on the web. Successful at what? Good question.
We've asked our clients to recontextualize their business. We've recontextualized what it is to be a services business.
You know, there are people out there, such as myself, who have trouble with the word recontextualize. Tell me what you do in English.
We provide services to companies to help them win.
So do trucking firms.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely.
What is it you do?
And our talent is to do a certain thing, whereas a trucking firm...
But what is it you do?
We radically transform businesses to invent and reinvent them.
That's still very vague.
Business strategy.
Okay, so what in the world is happening here with these individuals? What's going on? That was terrible, right? Tim, you came off the mute.
Right. I just don't know what's talking about, right? So it's a simple question and need a simple answer, right?
Right. You would think so. Now, everybody will also say, well, they're using jargon and they're trying to sound really smart or something like that. And I think what's happening underlying all this, to give them a little bit of a benefit of a doubt, is that this is the curse of knowledge, a perfect example of the curse of knowledge in action. So the curse of knowledge, they probably sit around little tables talking about contextualizing and recontextualizing and inventing and reinventing. So they talk about all of that and it makes sense to them because they're operating from the same base of knowledge. Just like all of us, we've got a certain base of knowledge about our expertise in our functional areas, in the teams that we're leading, in the operations that we're delivering. So we have our own expertise there. And so when we talk about it in a way that we think is going to land, but doesn't necessarily ever land in the mind of the listener. So that's the same thing that's happening right here. They're using language that makes sense to them that doesn't make sense to us. And so we always have to shift back. This isn't a listener audience focused message for them. It's a very self-centered message in that case. It's their own subject matter expertise there where we need to get out of that and say, gosh, how do I make this more relevant to the audience? So again, this is what happens to us. It makes perfect sense in our heads. And in fact, there's this fantastic research that was done out of Stanford University where this professor took a group of subjects and she ran a very, very simple experiment. And she said, she goes, I'm going to have half of you over here, half of you over here, half here are tappers. You're going to tap the tune to a song, knock it on a desk or something. You're just going to tap out the tune to a song, like Happy Birthday, something very simple. And the listener has to guess what that is. Well, it turns out that's a tremendously difficult thing to do. And literally what she found out is the tappers, because they had the background, they actually heard the song in their head. They had all that rich context behind it when the audience that was listening could never guess what that song was. So Razorfish does the same thing. They're using these words that make sense to them, but in the process of influence, again, as we're shifting from information to influence, the prime task for our message is to cross these boundaries. So to cross boundaries from my head into your head, from this team into this one, from this business unit over here to this business unit. And the biggest barrier of all is to how do I get from inside the organization to outside the organization? So as you start talking to clients, to customers, to partners that might not have that same base of Otis language, what does that look like and sound like? And how do we start rephrasing that in a way that becomes even more meaningful to that particular audience? So it's a huge challenge. So if we were to look and kind of bring this home a little bit and say, all right, well, how might you be cursed? So maybe it's not inventing and reinventing, but maybe it sounds something like reshaping an industry and defining a new category through innovative solutions created with purpose-built platforms and dedicated to best-in-class customer experiences. So we have all this language that we use, but it doesn't necessarily land with our audience because we're not starting where they are, we're starting where we are. So how do we do that? Well, we're gonna put this into practice right now. So you've got everybody's thinking about a topic that you can use? Yep. Okay, great. Because we're going to put some structure to us. I'm going to walk you through a structure that you can use for any message, and it will help you start shifting from information to influence. So just grab a scratch sheet of paper if you can, and just jot some notes. You can also take notes on your computer as well, but it might be helpful just to do a quick little scratch sheet of paper. And we're going to step through this step by step. It's a 4-step process. We're just doing the very framing of the message. So anytime you start preparing for a meeting, for a presentation, for a call, start here. And that is 4 simple steps: listeners, point of view, action, and benefit. Listeners, point of view, action, benefit. If you just spend literally 3 to 5 minutes before you go into any meeting, you will be more focused, you'll be more organized, and you will start shifting from information to influence so that you can move the business forward. Okay, so we're going to step through that. So we're just going to take a sheet of paper, have numbers 1 through 4 listed here, and we're going to create a message right here and now. Everybody ready? Okay, good stuff. All right. I start that, we think about the listeners first. And I love this quote that people don't remember what we think is important. They remember what they think is important. So we need to create a message where that's particularly relevant to them. And so this very first step is about knowing who your listener is and spending time on that. It doesn't have to be a ton of time, but just a minute to start asking yourself questions. Again, I'll send you these slides. We're not going to take time to answer every single one of these, but just stepping back and going, gosh, what is this individual or group or team or organization expecting from this? Why are they here? What are they expecting to hear? How do they feel about the topic right now? What do they know about the topic already so I can start getting out of my curse of knowledge? How do they feel about you? Do they view you as a subject matter expert? Do they view you as, are you a new leader? They're not sure. What level of detail might they need or want? So are they more facts, figures, detail oriented, or are they more focused on broader business initiatives? These last couple of questions, the last 2 bullet points here, I think are the best ones to think about. How can you help them? So when we think about those messages again, Juicy talking about the importance of being transparent and yet positive in that, and how do we start massaging that message? We start with this notion of how might we help them? So this might be difficult news to deliver, but how could this help them? What problems might this solve for a particular group? And then the last one is what would make them resistant? So why would they challenge what you're saying? That's a really, really great one to prepare for, especially if you're presenting up toward an executive audience or a senior leader audience. What would make them resistant? Why would they challenge what you're saying? So the first step is thinking about those things. For the purposes of this exercise today, all I want you to do is step back and think about, write down who your listener is. So it's one person, it's a group, it's whoever. You're going to write down who that group is. And then I'd like you to pick 3 adjectives that best describe them based on how you kind of think about these questions here. 3 descriptors. So they're risk averse, they're change resistant, they're eager, they are skeptical, maybe they're time pressured. So pick 3 adjectives that best describe them. Oops, sorry. So I did that one. Okay. Here you are. 3 adjectives to describe your listener. So just go ahead and jot that down. That's on your number 1 there. So pick a listener group and then 3 adjectives that best describe them. Does anyone have one they want to share? Who's got a listener group and some adjectives? Just to kind of ground us a little bit.
I can go ahead if someone else doesn't want to go, because actually I have an important call tomorrow, and it's with my team members, so the what we call operating territory leads, and I want to cascade to them the new repair strategy growth. Strategy. So it is a call that I'm thinking how to deliver the right message, to explain them the action that we take and the change that we want to do in the organization. Which I see some faces laughing here, smiling, because it's a common topic in Otis in general. And I think that the people that are P&L leaders, probably they face the same challenge with me, that the team nowadays, our team members are skeptical, not necessarily they see the roadmap for the growth, and they have been also overwhelmed for all the changes that we have the last, I would say, 1 year, 1 year and a half in the organization. So for me, going to this call tomorrow and explain them what will change again, how we should do it, and why, it's a very, very critical, let's say, conversation.
Oh, wow, Elvira, that's so good. Thank you for sharing. Skeptical, overwhelmed, especially with the recent changes over the last year or so.
Yeah.
Just tuning into that alone before you launch into the new growth strategy is really important. Understanding where they are and meeting them where they're at is very, very critical in that. And that's going to enable you to have a more effective conversation as a result of it. So just understanding where they are, great. Perfect example there. Thank you for sharing that. That'll be a good one that we can keep pulling out a little bit. Okay, so everyone's got a listener group and you have 3 adjectives to describe them. And that just helps ground us in who that listener is so that we can shift from self-centered content over to audience-centered content. Especially what will happen with, for example, cascading a strategy. So we get a message from way up here. We get a message from corporate, and then we need to make sure it starts landing. But what can happen is just forward that message, email, forward this message. That's it. Versus, okay, I have a team who's particularly overwhelmed. They're skeptical that they haven't seen a roadmap on this before. So now knowing that, how do I take that message and make it very meaningful to them? So that's exactly the direction we're headed. That's great. Okay, perfect. And it's a nice example that could go across the board here. So thank you very much for sharing that. Okay, next up, once we have our listeners, next up is the point of view. And the point of view is probably of the four things that we're focused on here, this is the most difficult one to wrap our heads around. So let me see here. Thanks, Rena. Appreciate it. Okay, so here is where, oops, excuse me. All right, so point of view is next. Point of view is one thing. It's the one thing you want your audience to walk away with. So what about how should they be thinking or acting differently about the new growth strategy? How should they be thinking or acting differently about this new initiative, about an allocation of resources, about how to approach funding, about how to work across the team cross-functionally differently? So how do I want them to change the second bullet here? The biggest shift in how you want your listener to change the way they think or act. And what we want to try to do here is get to the why for this audience. So maybe they're overwhelmed, they're skeptical, they're not sure what to, they're done with change. They feel like they've done too much of it already. So how do I position the topic in a way that's very meaningful to them? So let me give you a couple of examples here. So we start with why. We want to find the lead of the story. So ultimately, if you're reading an article, a newspaper article, an online article, whatever it is, you're reading a news article, the headline is at the top. It's not all the way at the bottom. So you know who won the World Cup in the headline. You don't have to read until the very end to find out. That's what we're doing. We're trying to find the lead of the story. And so here's a couple of examples. So maybe you start with something like this. Now, this is a self-centered message. This is purely informational, for example. So my point of view here is this work will mitigate significant risk to the business. It's like, well, that's not very influential. It's not super meaningful to this audience. How do I make it how do I have a little bit more why behind it? And so maybe it sounds a little bit more like compliance of this new regulation will allow us to maintain trust in our strong relationships. So maybe I'm talking to a customer facing group in this particular time. They don't really care about risk to the business. That's not the lead of the story for them. The lead of the story for them is that they can maintain their relationships because that's what's most critical, most important. So it's just shifting that a little bit to make it more audience centered. Here's another example. Integrating and adopting this AI tool will optimize productivity across a business. Is anybody chartered with implementing AI tools right now? No, you have a couple. We got a couple there. There's always somebody. So integrating this tool will optimize productivity across a business. And as someone that's all over those AI tools, of course, I'm going to lead with that. But that's a self-centered message. I know that it's going to lead to a lot of productivity. But excuse me, maybe I have an audience who's a little scared of AI and they don't want to use it because they think their jobs are going to be at risk. So I might say, this AI tool is going to free you up to focus on that higher level work that you're so good at and build stronger relationships with our partners and clients. Okay, well, that's a lead of my story. Now, this is one thing. If they only walk away with one thing from your entire message or presentation, that's your point of view. So that's what you want to try to articulate here. Again, the biggest shift in how you want your listener to think or act about the topic. So go ahead and jot that down. You've got your listeners, 3 adjectives. Now go for your point of view. What about that point of view? So Elvira, if we pull this example through around new growth strategy, what is it? What are we trying to shift or change in how they think or act about that? Is it about engaging? Is it about, I don't know. And we can chat through and workshop it if you like.
Well, it's obviously about engaging.
Yeah.
And it's obviously about convincing them that is also the right approach for the customer.
Okay. All right. So that could be, and remind me who this is the operational territory leads, you said?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Great.
They are the ones that they need to execute actually the strategy. So it's the most critical population, I would say.
And what do they care about? What are they chartered with?
No, well, there are people that they have seen, most of them they're quite experienced, so they have seen how this business line is growing, so they cannot really believe that we can achieve the target that we have. So they're actually convinced that we cannot achieve it. So by default, they come across with this mindset. I would say, and they are not convinced on the support that we get or will get from the global team about achieving this target.
I see. I see. So what's different that you can pull on there? Is there something that's part of the new strategy that will enable that?
Well, there are two things. I'm trying to bring them concrete support. So I will not just deploy the strategy and explain what we need to achieve. They know that, but going more into concrete action that by then we can do that and this and this. So breaking down somehow the roadmap in months, weeks, and then quarters. And what I'm trying to do also at the same time, knowing that they are overwhelmed and busy taking their energy in different things like IT and all those things that they are very much I would say distracted from that. I'm trying to take something out from their table. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to come with, okay, this is a concrete action, this is what we can do, and the very concrete support that you can get from those people by then. So really giving them deadlines, and then this is the thing that we will take out from your table.
So maybe, and you're just trying to find the lead of this, what's the one thing you want them walking away with that would signify success if they left with that? And what I just heard you say that might be interesting is something around, to execute on this new strategy, we have to shift our focus from the what to the how. How we do this is what's going to make a pivotal difference in our ability to execute. And then you're going to go into all the details about that means that support will shift. That means that we're going to take something off your plate. That means that, and those are all how things, where maybe what's different this time around is that it's not so focused on the what, the target, the specific objective that we have to reach, the unattainable numbers that we're never going to meet. But let's focus on the how, because that's in our control. And when we do that right, we'll get to the numbers. We don't need to worry about that. It's just none of it's perfect, and just with the limited amount of time, that's just what I heard you say, that maybe that could be a cool thing to pull out. Because if everybody in that room left if I focus on the how instead of the what, I will be more successful. That could be something kind of cool. Okay. All right, let's move on. So point of view, see the difference in those? It's shifting from information over to influence. And that would be different than if Elvira said, I'm here today to talk about the new growth strategy. Okay, that's information. That's squarely in that informed category versus, I'm excited to talk to you about how we're going to execute on the new strategy because it's all about the how. It's not as much about the what. Let's focus on, and then you go on from there. And there's lots more detail underneath it, but that's the crisp thing that if everybody left with, could be successful. Okay. So next up, once you're as the speaker, as the messenger, you should have the mindset that people are going to buy off on that point of view and they're going to be begging to know what to do next. So you have to tell them. And this is where we often misstep as well in the messaging process, which is, okay, so I've laid out the information. Okay, bye. I don't have anything specific. I'm not shifting toward influence because I'm not giving anybody anything to do. So we articulate an action step here, action step and a benefit. And so the action step is what helps to start making it concrete. So here's one thing you can do. This is the next thing your listener would do once they buy off on your point of view. And then we present them with a benefit as well. So what's in it for them? Make it really personal. So you're going to jot down an action step if they buy off on your point of view. So if I buy off on this, okay, we're going to focus on the how and not the what. What do I have to do? Maybe I have to identify something that I could take off my plate. Maybe I have to shift the way that I'm working on a particular operational execution element. And then what's a benefit for me? So again, if they're skeptical, overwhelmed with change, how do we present them with something that's going to give them more assurance? And if we're focused on the how, maybe they have more confidence that that will get done. And that's the right step toward the what eventually. So an action step and a benefit. And that's where you're going to jot that down right on your sheet of paper or in your notes on your computer. So jot down an action step. What do they have to do? And then what do they get if they do it? And that keeps that notion of we're moving, we're shifting, we're changing. I'm not just providing information that you're going to just sit there and think about. So that action step could be something simple like it could be compare, pilot, understand, learn about, explore. And then that benefit, if you can make it really individual to them, it becomes that much more powerful. How's everybody doing? Good? Makes sense? Questions on any of these items? It's funny, when we do our one-on-one coaching, I'm working on a lot of
Yeah.
messages with senior executives, and this action step it can be a really tough thing to figure out. Like, what do I want them to do? Especially if I'm presenting up, that becomes more of a challenge. Juicy, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking that the most challenging thing is make it personal. It's not so easy to find, the right way to make something personal for the audience, of course.
Yeah, and think about it as if you go back to how you describe them again, so if they're risk averse, what's a benefit that could give them some peace of mind? If they're really skeptical, what's going to give them a little bit more assurance in that? So it doesn't have to be deeply individually personal, but the more personal in general you can get to the audience versus, well, that's going to be better for the company and we'll have greater scores and those corporate benefits are good, but they're not as motivating. So it can be a little bit tough to do. So you got to think on that a little bit. And again, this is where this benefits from, hey, I've got this message, running it by someone. So getting some feedback from someone in the program, it could be your protege, it could be your sponsor. So any of those would be very, very helpful in the process. Let me give you just a quick example. We had that AI tool example. So the listeners here would be it's an internal team, they're expert, but they are concerned. Hirsch, hang on one sec. Let me wrap up this example. This AI tool will free us up to do all the great things and build great relationships. The action step here, pilot the tool with a small team on a specific analysis, get feedback, address concerns so that we can eventually focus on the more challenging work and become more strategic advisors to the business. Something like that. Hirsch, go ahead.
Yeah, so kind of a question here.
Of course.
Lead to the benefits and point of view.
Yeah.
In many of our work environments, and to give as an example, when we deal with the customers or vendor, both of us have a different interest. Optimize my profits. I want to gain more and more profit from the deal. Whereas customer point of view is kind of opposite. You want to get as much as possible discount from the deal. Okay, and I need to make a kind of a presentation and I need to make a story about my product and services.
Yes.
So that's where something, kind of a confusing or what you call challenging scenario.
I see.
If I try to think as a customer point of view.
Right.
So I will not make a profit. I will not able to make my objectives.
That's right. Hirsch, you broke up just a little bit, so I just want to repeat and make sure I understand. So essentially you feel like you've got two different audiences for the message. So you've got the customer audience, you've got the internal audience, which is focused on profit, customers focused on discount. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you can, so this is a good example of the same topic needing completely different messages. Now, provided they're not all in the same room together. Are they all in the same room together?
Fortunately not.
Good. Okay, great. I was hoping you said that. So you have the same topic, but you have very, very different messages. And that walk away with that alone. And this has been a success. So you've got it same topic, different audiences, totally different messages. So then you go back to the drawing board, you say, okay, and you've done that already. You said, gosh, what's important to the customer? What's important internally? Now, the strategy behind that and how you bridge discount to the customer with profit to the company, that's different. But how you message it becomes, two different messages essentially. Does that make sense?
Okay, I'm still not clear. Maybe it might take some more time to understand, especially the messaging. But
Yes.
sometimes conflicting messages, and
Yeah, it could be specific to a certain situation, for example, but just as a general note, for everyone here, you've got the same topic, say it's a product, it's a service, it's something. As I'm messaging that internally to the company around the strategy for example, achieving the right profit targets and everything else, versus how we message that to the customer, which is value we're providing, the discount that we're able to do, so on and so forth. There are different types of messages there. So bridging those, doing kind of the communications in between might be a little bit more complex. We don't have time to get into that today, but essentially same topic, different audiences. You've got two different messages that you're articulating there. Okay, we're going to start to wrap up here. So just that structure alone, if you can go through your listeners' point of view, action, and benefits, and it's for a very specific situation, that's not going to work across the board for everything on that topic. So you have a message now that's focused and organized. And then from there, which we're not going into today, but from there, it's like, what does my listener need to know to buy off on the point of view, take the action, and then realize the benefit from that? So that's where, in Elvira's case about the growth strategy, that's when we start going, okay, what's the background? I'm going to do a little bit of empathy and say, I know how you're feeling about this, and I understand you might be skeptical because of this, this, and this. Here's what's different. Here's where we're going to focus. And then here are next steps and what we need to do moving forward. So then you can organize your message, but because you have it framed very in a focused way where it's a specific destination where you're taking people now it's easier to fill in all the blanks behind it. So you frame your message and then you fill in the blanks. Now, that is a logical message. So that's what we've done. We've created a logical message here, but I love this notion here, a very important one, that logic makes you think, but emotion makes you act. So in the case where I need them to believe in a new strategy, in the case where I need them to understand new profit metrics, in the case where I need them to go with understanding the value of what we're providing, logic makes you think, emotion makes you act. And so here is John Cotter is a professor of change, also at Harvard. And he said, we make a major mistake about change. He's an expert on change. He's written a dozen books. And he said, when we're trying to get people to change, there's two ways that we can get people to do it. We can get them to think about it, analyze it, and then they change. And that is an effective way to get people to change. So we can present them with a lot of data where they're thinking, they do their own analysis, and then they make a change. That's logic. Versus far more powerful way and less often used way is how do I get them to see it, feel it, and then they change? How do I get them to see it, feel it, and then they change? So this is all about how do we create content that now boosts that emotional connection? So we have that emotional connection by how we deliver the message, but we also can build that into the message itself. So how do we boost that emotional connection? And we do that through what we call sharps, stories, humor, analogies, references and quotes, pictures and visuals. Let me give you an example of what this looks like, because what sharps do is they create mental images. So they help people see it, feel it, and then they change. So, what's a story? What's an example we might bring into Elvira's example around this growth strategy, focusing on the how and not the what? When we focus on the how, maybe there's an analogy or an example from another company or something that makes that like, oh, okay, it is possible. I think it's impossible. I'm super skeptical of this right now. What's something that would make me think it's possible? So another example, it could be something from your own experience. Or, gosh, that's how to use AI, is to come up with really great sharps for things, by the way, if you've got the opportunity to do that. So let me give you one quick example here. And this is a financial advisor that came into one of our messaging courses. And this financial advisor said, "Hey, I'm going to market with this message, and I want to stand out in a crowded market." And so she said, "We provide high quality investment solutions, holistic wealth management, cash flow management, so on and so forth, all meeting long-term investment goals." And then I said, "Well, this is hard to see. Like, this is a message that isn't crossing boundaries from inside the organization to outside the organization. I know that makes sense to you, but that might not make sense to your prospects and to your clients. So here's an example of an event planner." So this is an event planner and how they talked about themselves. They said, "Who designs it, arranges it, loads it, brings it, drapes it, pins it, hangs it, lights it, and takes it all down so that you don't have to? We do." So that's a very clear picture in your mind as to what's happening there. So the financial advisor said, "Okay, I can do that." Said, "Who reads the stock tables for you about your mutual funds, talks to the IRS, organizes your children's college funds, so on and so forth, and how you have enough money to vacation in Italy when you retire?" We do. There's a clear picture there, as opposed to all of those abstractions that kind of make your mind blur. So that's the objective, is to add a sharp in there and make sure, excuse me, add a sharp in there to help bring it to life. So it's an example, it could be a story, it could be analogy, and you start there and then you bring in your point of view, your action, and your benefit. And that's what helps make that message shift from information to influence and even to inspire people to change the way they think or act. So that's ultimately where we're going. I know it was a lot in a very, very short amount of time, but that framework, start practicing those things. I love this quote by Will Rogers. He is he's an American actor, and he said this: "Even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you just sit there." So even if you're moving along, if you stop, you're not going to go anywhere. So how do we keep going and make sure that we put all of these things in play? This is ultimately, this is ultimately about not missing the opportunity to plant your destination. So again, if it's a one-on-one, it's a team meeting, it's an operations review, it's a board meeting, it doesn't matter what the situation is. You can always be very intentional about the kind of experience that you're creating. So thinking about that emotional connection, how we boost that, both by way of how we come across and how we add that to our content. And then ultimately, how do we shift from a self-centered message over to audience-centered? So that is where we will land with today. Just some tips, a very, very quick set of tools, tips, tricks to make your communication experience even more effective. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me. If you've got this important meeting coming up, email me really quick. We can exchange emails. We can jump on a quick Zoom. I'm more than happy to help. But be sure to connect with us, because it's just been a pleasure working with all of you today, this morning, this afternoon, this evening. Thank you for joining and staying in it. And I will hand it back over to Samantha to wrap us up.
Thanks, Kelly. Like Kelly said, thank you guys for joining us today. Our next session is going to be our first sponsor panel on April 30th. So just make sure to mark your calendar for that. And we'll be sending the slides and highlights over following this session for you guys, so you can reference those as well. But if you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to reach out, and we're here to help. So thank you guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
All right.
All right. Okay.
Okay.
That was
Oh,
good. I know you had to speed through that. You did a great job.
well, I was trying to be like try to slow down and the questions are really good.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, I only know that because I know what
Yeah.
the content we typically do. So I thought you did a great job with like the cadence and everything. So,
Okay. Okay, great.
um, okay, so I'll get the slides from you and then I'll just attach those in our normal recap highlights. Anything
Perfect.
else?
No, I don't think so. Let me know
All
if you need
right.
anything else.
I
Okay.
will.
All
Thank you,
right.
Kelly.
Thanks. We'll see you. Bye.
Bye.